Darkcast Network. Come to the dark side of podcasts. We have cookies.
Cookies? Me love cookies.
If you like weird, spooky, and strange history, then I have the podcast for you. My name is Brenda, and I'm the host of Horrifying History. Are you into the dark side of history? Horrifying History tells you about the side of history that people don't normally talk about. We tell the tales of haunted places, infamous true crimes, the paranormal, and unsolved mysteries, and then we look to history to see where the truth actually lies. Want to get spooky with us? Get your Horrifying History fix by subscribing today on your favorite podcast provider or by going to our website at horrifyinghistory.podbean.com.
Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot.
Hey, y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hi, Dylan.
Hello, Heather.
Wow, it's been a wild weekend.
Geez Louise.
Lots of stuff happening in the news. Maybe we won't dive into that too much, but man, I don't know what's happening in America.
There's some goings-ons. Some stuff's happened. Been a big weekend. Really.
Oh, yeah, some big announcements.
It's been a big couple of weeks,
The current events are eventing. They're current.
And that's why I'm hiding here in the studio, the Mountain Murders studio.
Yeah, this is why I just keep my nose to the grindstone, cranking out true crime, because that world is much safer than the one I'm living in at present.
It's much more settling than the unsettling real event, true events happening right now.
For real, yeah. Dylan, for reals. So, if you need a good distraction, Mountain Murders has you covered. But before we get started, Dylan, let's give a big thanks.
Oh, God.
Thanks to our newest patrons who are sponsoring today's show, Anna and Margaret.
Anna and Margaret, thank you so much. They have lucked out. We lucked out getting them as patrons and sponsoring us directly, and they lucked out with all that extra content.
Dylan, we just dropped this weekend. If you have been thinking about joining Patreon and you're like, wonder what kinds of stuff they publish on Patreon, wonder what these bonus episodes are. We just published an episode on urban legends where we kind of dive into the legend and then delve into the history or maybe where the legend originated.
The possible origins of said legend. And
we had so much fun. We're planning to drop a part 2 and continue our discussion of urban legends.
That was a blast.
But that was a fun conversation, right?
It was so much fun.
I learned a few things while I was researching.
I learned a lot, and I actually remember most of it.
Because some of the urban legends are rooted in real crime cases. So it's kind of interesting to see how those stories can evolve.
Yes.
And
become
it is. Modern folklore.
Yeah, and that's truly what it is. It's a modern oral history.
All right, Dylan, are you ready to get into today's case? It is a juicy one. I think we got to get started.
There's no time to waste. There's a lot to talk about here, and I think the listeners are gonna find this a good one.
Dylan, this case kind of has all of the elements that I look for in a true crime case.
Yeah, I would agree.
Right? Well, first of all, we've got the 1980s. And I'm a big fan of the decade.
Dude, it's an awesome
I'm an
decade.
80s kid. I love 80s music, 80s movies, 80s fashion. I love all things 1980s.
80s was so rad. And that's why it's made a big comeback lately.
I need to get back into my 80s podcast.
I need to get me a BMX bike.
I had an 80s podcast, Dancing with Myself, and I need to get back to recording that.
I wish you would,
I'm going to
because
get back to work on it. Because I love the 80s.
I loved every episode. It always made me feel nostalgic.
Yeah, I was going to say nostalgia.
All right.
Leg warmers, pop rocks.
So here we are. We're getting transported back to the 80s.
Okay, yeah. So, get your sweatband and your Miami Vice jacket, whatever, your DeLorean. Let's do it.
And your gold chains.
Yes. So the 1980s, let's see, shopping malls were thriving. Music was amazing. You had new wave, rap, heavy metal, pop music. MTV had so much influence on the youth culture, right? It first aired in 1980. The music video, I feel like MTV really kind of changed things for a generation.
Oh, yeah. I think you can definitely pick out a generation that grew up on the original, the first MTV, what it evolved into.
I think that's why 80s music has such a pop. It was like so big on the radar because you had the video element like accompanying the music.
Well, it was a huge jump forward for media. You know what I mean? So now instead of just a song or instead of just some album art, which had been, a big thing for years and years, or swag or, a shirt, posters, any of that, you brought in the video, and these artists were allowed to express themselves, to make bold statements, not only through their music, but also visually. Wow.
Yeah, you had TV shows like Family Ties, The Cosby Show, Dynasty, Dallas. Those were a few of the most popular ones. Yet there was a dark side of the 1980s, Dylan. Living in the shadow of the Cold War, parental neglect. As divorce became more common, you saw more single parents working to make ends meet. You get a generation of latchkey kids.
Yeah.
Who are just kind of left to raise themselves.
Or you get both parents working in the household instead of just one.
You had drugs like crack cocaine making an impact in urban areas, eventually hitting rural areas, right? Then there was a lot of finger pointing at the music, the movies, the comic books. And this negatively impacted kids. You had adults telling them, like, the music you're listening to is bad.
Right.
It's evil, and it's making you do these bad things.
Right?
And, of course, we had the Satanic Panic. So I mention this because this finger pointing, the music, this kind of parental neglect that's happening. You have, like, maybe less of the two-parent household. Kind of all of that is going to make up our story today.
Yeah, I think it has a key. It's a big part of our story. And I mean, wow, it's just so many things were going on in the 80s, and I think it was almost like, you had all the stuff in the 60s, civil rights, the flower child movement, all that stuff, Vietnam, that was kind of a big deal. And then it kind of died down and calmed down a little bit. And it's almost like it started churning again in the 80s, and kind of carried over through the 90s. But I would say nowadays, instead of it's your music that's affecting you or something, it's been replaced with social media for young people. All the bad things, all the, you got talked in or influenced to do this. It's kind of blamed on social media now.
Yeah, oftentimes I wonder, all these bad deeds and these, bad kids, it was blamed on music and movies, but I'm kind of like, okay, but you're the parent, so what are you doing?
Apparently you weren't parents.
If the music is parenting your child and you're not, then you're the problem.
Well, see, I've never sought for anything outside of my home to teach my kids their moral code. That is my job as a parent, right? You can say, I've never understood that.
I don't either.
I've never it seems to me if you think that video games, movies, music, or any social media, anything made your kid do something significant, then I think you are admitting that you failed as a parent.
Bing, bing, bing.
Wow. Damn. Okay. I feel insightful today. This is going to be good.
I think you just won the conversation. All right. So Richard Allen Kasso was born March 29th of 1967 in Long Island's Huntington Hospital. He was the firstborn and only son of Richard Sr., known as Dick, and Lynn Kasso. They were both teachers. Dick was an avid sports fan, which he indulged by also coaching. So not only was he a teacher, but he was a coach.
Oh, so it's sports all the time with Dick, huh?
Sports all the time. There was actually, I guess, a story that when Lynn went into labor with their son, Dick made her wait until a game was over before he would drive her to the hospital.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if that's a true story, but that's what they out here saying.
If that's true, then he's aptly named.
From the exactly,
Because that's a Dick move.
Think you'll learn through the story that that was probably a good name for him in general, because maybe Dick's not such a great person. From the outside, people describe the Kasso's family as like a Norman Rockwell painting. They had a daughter, Kelly, born in 1969, Jody, another daughter, born in 1970, and then the youngest, like the baby of the family, Wendy, born in 1973. The Kassos lived in a nice middle-class neighborhood in the town of Northport. They had like a 4-bedroom home. Dick had a nice Corvette. I mean, they're a successful family.
So you would say neighbors and friends view them as a family that's going places.
Just like the all-American kind of family, right? Northport is a historic maritime village located in Huntington, which is in Suffolk County, on the north shore of Long Island. In the 1980s, around 7,500 residents lived in Northport. Just to give you a little history, in the 1830s, shipbuilding brought rapid change and growth to the once rural farming community, and the shipbuilding boom lasted about 50 years.
Wow.
The Kassos, I mean, they were doing pretty well, Dylan. They had a summer cabin in Argyle, New York. Ricky was described as a good-natured child who had no problems making friends. He really enjoyed those summer vacations when his parents would take him to the family's cabin, and he would just engage in like normal outdoor activities, fishing, hunting, maybe playing with a snake, poking it with a stick, that kind of stuff.
I always poke things with a stick.
Well, yeah. Who doesn't?
You gotta.
I like to poke things.
With a stick.
Or I'll just poke it with anything. I'll poke it with my finger.
Oh, ooh.
Maybe not the snake.
Damn, that's kind of intimate.
But I like to poke you with my finger.
You do poke me with your finger.
I know. You kind of do the little
I go,
I know. It's like a little doughboy. It's so cute. Now, Dick encouraged his children to play sports. Again, this is a guy who's obsessed with athletics. Always watching the game.
So by encouraging, you probably mean he tells them they're going to play.
Ricky would play football before school started with some other neighborhood boys. He was considered a less than average student, though, mostly earning C grades. Dick didn't mind if Ricky was not an academic as long as he was an athlete. One of Ricky's sisters said, quote, "Nothing else could compete with my father's love of sports, not even his kids. Sports were his entire life."
That seems like a lot.
Well, the only way to earn Dick Kasso's love was to play sports.
Oh, and win, I'm sure.
Ricky played baseball as a child, but he wasn't a standout player. Dick Kasso would often humiliate his son, like berating him while he was on the field if he made a mistake. He would loudly chastise his son and sometimes would be reprimanded by the coach, who would have to remind him, like, it's just a game. The kids are here to have fun. Calm down, Dad.
These types of parents that Rick is with the sports, they ruin it for everyone. They ruin it for the other kids, the other parents, their own kid. Because there's nothing, it's a pretty sad thing to watch when some overbearing parents giving their kid down the road in public.
Recently, I was at a park, just taking a walk with Rufus, and posted by a baseball field was a sign, like reminding parents, this is a game and we will not tolerate foul language or physical altercations. And I'm like, well, what a sad day when you have to post something like that at a public park as a reminder to adult people.
Right.
Hey, don't act like a fucking idiot in front of kids at this park. I mean, it's just ridiculous to me.
Well, it's almost like people have taken the arguing they get used to doing online into the real life.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to argue. Everybody's big mad. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I feel like everybody has like all this aggression all the time.
Yeah, I know.
I just don't remember when we were kids, parents being that involved.
You had an overly exuberant parent here or there, just like customers in stores. You had somebody kind of wild out. That was an outlier.
Well, I'm saying that
was-
parent was an outlier.
Yeah, that
I mean,
parent's
in the
an
years
out-
I
yes.
played sports, I rarely remember a parent who was like fanatical or cussing a ref or getting pissed off and wanting to fight somebody.
Getting in arguments with other
Let's
parents.
be honest, most of the parents were just like, when is this going to be over so we can go home? This
I
is
know.
not how I wanted to spend my 8 o'clock Saturday morning at a termite basketball game.
Man, the sports, they're inconveniently, the times of sports are pretty inconvenient.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's all the good times.
Yeah, Ricky hated playing sports. He didn't like baseball or football, which was another sport his dad, kind of encouraged him to get into. By the fall of 1977, when Ricky was 10 years old and a fifth grader, that's when he stopped playing football before school. So instead of going out early to play a little game of, tag football before school started, he kind of started skipping that.
Oh.
Which was noticed by his friends and, other kids. It was around that time that Ricky was offered marijuana for the first time by a friend's older brother. Now, Dylan, I am very naive. Does 10 seem young to be offered drugs?
10 is young for a lot of things.
Right? I mean, that seems very young.
Look, I was still going around with a stick with a little firecracker in the end, talking about it was a gun and playing, like the little black cat. I mean, this was me living on the edge, was having a lighter in my possession.
You did not need a lighter.
Well,
You
no,
were a
I
little
didn't.
pyro.
And I would light the little black cats. I would unravel them, and I would have one at a time, and I'd light it, and I'd black Bart, you're gonna
dangerous.
get yours. Hey, never had an accident, never put an eye out. It was a blast. But if someone was to say, "Hey, kid," psst, psst, in the black overcoat in the alley, which there were no alleys, I lived in the woods in the middle of nowhere.
So somebody was hiding behind a damn tree.
Somebody's hiding behind a rotten stump.
Somebody hiding behind a barn.
Talking about, "Hey,
You
kid,"
want to toke up behind this barn with me?
I would be freaked out.
Yeah.
And I certainly would not partake.
At 10 years old, that would have been nowhere on my radar.
No.
Not at all.
I'd have been
I was
scared to
still
death.
like playing with Barbies and, pretending I was a pirate.
So let's both agree that's rather young age to be introduced into the world of substances.
Well, by 12, many of Ricky's classmates were smoking pot. And I mean, this is the late 70s. I don't know if maybe times have changed, but again, even that seems young to me.
Well, for a lot of them to be doing it. But, maybe that is part of it, given the time frame and the drug culture of that time.
Ricky's world changed after using marijuana. He began smoking pot every day. He started hanging out with the other kind of stoner kids, and they were sort of self-proclaimed dirtbag kids.
Oh.
And from what I gathered, Dylan, I mean, they were kids who kind of liked to smoke pot and hang out and listen to music and didn't really take school seriously and kind of dressed in what might be considered by today's standards like alternative fashion for the time. A lot of them would wear like combat boots or Timberland work boots with maybe ripped up jeans and a band t-shirt and a flannel, grew their hair out long. And, maybe not everybody dressed like that during this time period.
Well, when I was growing up, this was known as the black t-shirt crowd.
Yep.
Right? And
I know what you mean.
I think they were known to maybe smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, we call these kids like headbangers.
Yeah.
Metalheads.
I think everybody had a similar group. They're one of the big four social groups, preps, jocks,
Greasers, socias.
black t-shirt crowd, everybody else who's just regular, whatever the
Well,
weird.
it seems like dirtbags was like not an insult, or maybe it was, but they kind of like made it their own. Like they were kind of proud, like, yeah, we're dirtbags. Like they were kind of proud of it.
Well, they're exhibiting to a degree antisocial behaviors, and they wear it proudly.
Well, Ricky was curious about other substances. After he's tried the marijuanas, they say it's a gateway.
People say it's a gateway. My take on that is these are people that would have tried the other substances as well. They just happened to do marijuana first. These are young addicts exploring to find their drug of choice. Wow, dude, I'm on one today.
I see.
Wow, I feel like
Maybe
someone.
clarity is your drug of choice.
Yeah, the gym.
I know you went and worked out. Look at you now. You're all sassy. Got the blood flowing.
I blowed my neck out though. I got a lot of cane patch on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm too strong.
I was gonna ask, are you Trump? But it's on your neck and not your ear.
You want to see?
Your little bandage.
You want
No,
to see it?
I don't want to see it.
Okay.
So he's hanging out with the dirtbag kids, the stoners, and those were kids who made fun of him for playing sports.
Yeah, so yeah. You know, it's funny to me.
So he's kind of torn between like two worlds, like this world that he wants of like hanging out with these kids and partying and smoking dope and listening to Led Zeppelin. But then there's this other world that his parents want for him, which is, you know, you be clean cut, make good grades, play sports, be an athlete, be popular.
Yeah, you know, it's always funny to me, these groups that claim to be nonconformist, you know, but they always want you to conform to their ideals or be exactly like them. And I always find that funny. You know what I mean? Like, why can't you just be friends with him and he happens to play sports too? You know what yeah. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah. No, I totally see what you're saying.
And it's all, yeah. If you're going to be one of the goth kids, you got to be just like the other goth kids. I've never understood that.
Yeah, I don't either. I was like a weird kid, you know, like
Right.
a weird alternative kid at a time when maybe that wasn't cool and I got picked on and whatever. But it was like I still played sports and, you know, I just did what I wanted to do. I wasn't like trying to fit, you know. Trying to fit in with like, oh, well, the alternative kids, they only skateboard and sit around smoking after school. I mean, I was like, fuck that. I want to play basketball. I want to run track. I want to be in the play. So I just did what I wanted to do. But I think a lot of times people don't. And they let that hold them back from the experiences they could have.
And that's because you did not care what other people thought. And I think people who truly don't care what anyone thinks about them, that you don't get directed by these other feelings.
Well, probably, but that's also been to my detriment, I think, is not giving a fuck what other people think.
Well, I'm not. Hey, there's pros and cons to everything. Okay.
Talk about antisocial behavior.
Yeah.
Okay, so in 7th grade, Ricky tries LSD for the first time. Again, that seems very young to be experimenting with hallucinogenics. Am I wrong?
No, and this is back then. I gotta imagine. You know, they say the marijuana back then was a lot less strong. You know, just basic. Had it, you know, the modern day hybrids and all that. None of that had happened to making it way stronger, more THC.
Yeah, you
blah,
had
blah,
like
blah.
just a few strands, right?
Yeah.
Like if you got like the Kush or something, that was like the good stuff, right?
Or the Colombian gold.
Like something from California, yeah.
You get a big old bag of it for, you know, 10 or 20 bucks, a lid they called it, which is literally the, you know, sandwich baggie top flipped over and it'll hold itself. I got to imagine that's about an ounce, you know what I'm saying? That's a good bit of weed. But I'm going to argue the LSD was
better
stronger.
back then?
Yeah, because you're talking about not that long since whatever dude's name was.
Leary
put it on, you know, let it loose.
Ken Kesey and
Yeah.
the electric Kool-Aid acid test and all that.
Yes.
The merry pranksters.
The government.
One flying over the damn cuckoo's nest.
The government refining it and using it, you know, in experiments and treatments. Yes. There was some really good LSD out there.
Right. Well, he's in 7th grade trying LSD.
Wow.
Youngins. Something called microdots were also popular. And Ricky and like these kids thought it was mescaline. But microdots were actually a low-grade acid mixed with PCP.
Okay. That sounds scary. And I don't even know what mescaline is, okay? I mean, I guess that's more of a natural thing, kind of like peyote. Am I right? I don't know.
I think
I've
I've only ever heard of it.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like something that kind of comes from out west. It's maybe more of a traditional thing used by the first peoples, if you will. You
say that, and then if you're wrong, someone's going to yell at you.
Well, I think I know enough about it.
Do you?
To know that that's true.
Well, it is a naturally occurring psychedelic.
All right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that.
Yeah. So we're going to assume that all my knowledge of this came from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So.
Okay. You know, they also talk about adrenochrome in that book and movie.
Well, there's that.
Anywho, when When 1979 rolled around, Ricky was swallowing hits of acid and popping microdots like it was candy.
Wow.
Like where, as like a normal person experimenting might take like 1 tab of acid, he's eating like 5 at a time.
Anyone I've ever heard of doing any of that, it's left a mark on them. Let's just say that.
Don't you get like fucking fried?
Yeah, dude, I've known people.
I mean, like I've known people, like older people. Like I remember being a kid and my uncle who, he's obviously older than me. There were people that were part of his generation, which would have been those kids growing up in like the late 60s and the early 70s. And he would see someone out and would talk to them and he'd be like, man, they're a fucking burnout. And I eventually kind of learned, even as a young person, like asking, what does that mean? And he's like, oh man, that person did way too much acid. And now their brain's all scrambled eggs or whatever.
They're like, wait, what?
And being a kid, I was like, what? Yeah, exactly. Or like having a bad trip that you don't quite come back from. I mean, I've heard stories of that kind of thing, but I don't know enough about it.
I've known a couple of people that toyed with these types of substances, and even in the modern day, as I was growing up, decades, about during this time, honestly, a little bit, maybe 8-10 years later, that I would consider a burnout. And it's like they never got their shit together. They're kind of real, it's almost like they're an airhead. You know what I mean? Like,
so is that what it does? It just kind of makes you like goofy and dumb?
Yeah, you're just like you can never concentrate. Like they never. Let's just say they don't make pointed statements.
Okay.
In a heated debate.
So someone might think that I'm a burnout. Well, I'm not. I'm just goofy.
You're just goofy.
I'm a natural blonde. Now Ricky started stealing to support his habit because he's 12. He didn't really have a job. So how's he going to fund this drug habit?
Yet another good reason not to get a drug habit when you're just a kid, because you don't have any disposable income to fund said habit.
Yeah, exactly. His first break-in was at St. Philip Neri, a Roman Catholic church, where he stole money from the collections.
So he just instantly takes it to sacrilegious. I mean, one of the first things he does will forever be a strike against him in the Lord's eyes. I mean, I even have known dirtbag criminal thieves that would not break into a church because they're like, come on.
Or steal from the church.
Or steal from the church or anything like that. I mean, that's pretty hardcore.
Steal the yearbook money.
Well, I think that's pretty shitty if you steal from all your classmates.
I agree. I actually know someone who did that.
Yeah, I know. And they were recounting the story to us like it was this big kind of funny thing they did in school. And I was like, that's pretty greasy.
I thought you were kind of shitty, dude.
It's almost like you take the milk money. Now nobody has milk.
When winter of 1980 rolled around, Ricky and his friends, they were just breaking into houses like all over the neighborhood. But they broke into the home of a schoolmate whose family was on a vacation at the time. He ended up caught, arrested, and charged with burglary. Dick Kasso figured his son was kind of like sowing his wild oats, boys will be boys kind of thing. But when he was searching Ricky's room, he and his wife find a bong.
Oh my gosh. Wait, I'm okay with just a little bit of light burglary. Okay. But now you're smoking marijuana? That's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Well, and I think, his dad had done something like not breaking, like stealing, but had done some goofy pranks like in college. So he was just kind of like, oh, it's just boys being boys kind of thing.
Well, I kind of get like
his dad sounds like kind of a meathead. So you can see that he would rationalize or justify this behavior.
Well,
as,
and I see that as a parent saying, well, it's just they got in with the wrong crowd, or it was a phase, or maybe they just made one dumb mistake. Now they know better. But if they continue down that road, that leads to juvenile. That leads to, bad things.
Well, it was around this time also. Not only is Ricky breaking into homes and stealing from his friends, from people he knows, using drugs, but he develops an interest in the occult after finding a library book on the subject. So now he's kind of diving into the occult, Satanism, witchcraft, dark arts, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. That kind of thing. In the woods.
Yeah,
That's a good place to do that.
So Dick and Lynn, they get their son into drug counseling when they find that bong. The drugs, that's just a step too far. You can go rob your friend, but you cannot smoke the reefers. And up until this point, they really didn't know that Ricky was using drugs. When 13-year-old Ricky arrived to the appointment with the counselor, he was high and told the counselor, "I like what I'm doing."
Oh, wow.
The effort seemed fruitless. A psychiatrist also offered little help. Ricky was uncooperative, speaking with a doctor, and after only about 4 sessions, he was kicked out of treatment. They said he was sabotaging his therapy and had no interest in help or recovery, and he was just really difficult, throughout the appointment. So they were like, we don't want to see him anymore.
Well, it's just a waste of time for everyone involved when someone has this attitude, even if it's a young person. Because if they don't want help, everyone's wasting their time. It doesn't matter if they happen to be 12 or 13 or if they're 30. It's no different.
Well, and I will say a lot of the resources I use for today's episode really paint Dick and Lynn as these like shitty parents. But I think they tried what they knew to do. And you have to think about, back then there weren't as many resources available as you have today. And so I think they tried maybe in the best way they could to help their son. But then, eventually they have to start using like tough love methods.
Well, I mean, at a certain point, what do you expect them to do?
Well, yeah.
I mean, if you have someone who absolutely will not get with the program, what are you going to do? I mean, are you going to beat them? Get physical with the kid? And a lot of times that just makes them even more, hate-filled and more rebellious. So it actually doesn't really work good either. So, I mean, what do you do?
Don't work good?
That don't work good either.
Well, we're going to talk more about his parents, but I just thought I would kind of mention that they do seem like they're making an effort. They're trying to get him into counseling. They're trying to get him into, see a psychiatrist to figure out what's causing, these problems with their son.
That's more than I ever got.
One of Ricky's best friends was Jimmy Triano, known as Drac.
Oh, wow.
So Jimmy was born December 10th of 1965 and raised in an orphanage until he was 5 years old. He would later say, quote, "better looking kids got adopted," while he was passed over.
Damn.
Now, Jimmy, there are a few reasons why he has this nickname. But let's first talk about this. He had some immediate problems after being adopted. His behavior was erratic. So he was kind of a troubled kid from the start. His adoptive parents noticed he was like an attention seeker. Even if it was negative attention, he would just go out of his way to get attention all the time. He was a slow learner. He had a lot of problems academically.
Right.
He refused to do schoolwork. And his attitude was that, like, if you're not going to like me, then you'll be scared of me. So, like, if the kid, other kids kind of didn't really like him, then he would bully them. He was an oddball loner. He had few friends. He didn't really fit in. As a young child, Jimmy developed a habit of walking into neighbors' houses and helping himself to whatever they had.
That's a bad habit.
Yeah, well, his parents kind of, I guess, chalked it up to, like, he had been raised in this orphanage where if you wanted something, you just went and got it from the kitchen.
Right.
And so he just sort of had this attitude of, like, well, you just walk around until you find what you want, because that's how it was at the orphanage, right? During a playground incident, Jimmy had severely cut his face with a chain from a swing. Like, he had unhooked the chain and, like, sort of jumped off the swing from the top, and it clipped his face and tore his face. So he had a really bad scar on his face. In addition to the fact that he had these really extra pointy, like, sharp teeth that were just a genetic trait. So kids called him Drac, like Dracula.
Oh, wow.
And at a school dance, they dedicated the Monster Mash to him.
Well, that's a little much. So
I think he kind of enjoyed, because, he likes the attention.
Yeah. So here he has a jagged scar on his face from a weird accident on the playground. Very pointy, noticeably sharp canine teeth.
Yeah, these are like really sharp teeth.
Yeah. And the poor kid thinking that he looks weird and that's why other kids got adopted instead of him. I mean, that's pretty tough way to view yourself.
Jimmy was also a kid that got into a lot of fights at school. Counselors felt he didn't really know right from wrong when they would talk to him. He didn't really seem to understand there was a problem with his behavior, or he shouldn't act a certain way. So that's not a good way to start life, right?
No, it's not.
During 7th grade, Jimmy's parents put him in football and wrestling to channel his physical aggression, and that's where he met Ricky Kasso, and the two just sort of hit it off. Ricky was living on the streets by Christmas of 1980. Dick had kicked him out of the house for refusing help offered, and because he had these ongoing troubles with drugs and law enforcement, he wasn't listening, he wasn't doing anything he was supposed to do, so his dad, kicked him out of the house.
And that certainly is the next level of tough, what a lot of people call tough love. But, I mean,
it's terrible because you have a 14-year-old kid living on the streets with nowhere to go, no way to take care of himself, no way to feed himself.
It is terrible.
But at the same time, what are parents supposed to do when a kid is violent, dangerous, threatening his sisters, doing these drugs, acting, just totally off the rocker because he's fucked up all the time?
Now, these are some serious drugs he's taking.
Getting into trouble with the law.
So you would seem like you're out of control. You may have bursts of violence.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. And that you refuse any treatment. All the extra things they've tried. He wants no part of any of it. So, at the end of the day, what do you do? What's your next choice?
Right. So, I think that, there's kind of the two sides of the story, and it's kind of hard to know where, I guess as a parent, as a person with a heart, you think how horrible, you can't just put your kid out on the street. But I guess if you're in the situation where you feel like I have no choice here, and my son could potentially kill me, kill his sisters, he's doing drugs, he's in trouble, what are you going to do, right?
Well, I'm not advocating they throw their child out, but I'm just thinking about what a terrible position as a parent that would be to have to make that choice.
14-year-old Ricky started selling drugs in the spring of 1981 to fund his drug habit and then, of course, buy food since he wasn't living at home. Finally, he was allowed back home, and Dick was under the assumption that if his son would just earn C's and play sports, that he was doing well as a parent and that his son was a success. Right?
Wow.
So this is all he's asking is come home, don't do drugs, make C's, play a sport.
And go to school regularly. Yeah. Don't fight your sisters. Just try to be what he considers normal.
Ricky had a lot of insecurities and desperately wanted his father's approval, yet Ricky had different interests than what his parents wanted for him. So again, he's kind of torn. Do I do what makes me happy, or do I please my parents?
Well, I think that's a natural, a lot of kids who aren't into all these other things Ricky's doing, a lot of kids have those feelings.
Ricky, along with many of Northport's teenagers, hung around Cow Harbor Park. There were these weird zoning laws which left the area unpoliced.
Yeah, I think it's where two municipalities overlap, and therefore the cops who are the closest, it's not technically their jurisdiction, and then the other cops who it's actually in their jurisdiction are a long ways away from the area. And they're not going to bother coming down there because it's this weird, murky, gray spot.
Yeah, it's kind of I tried to look into it, but it was kind of weird and confusing.
Right.
And I don't really understand. So, but yeah, that's kind of, that's probably the easiest explanation for breaking it down.
Yeah. And
it's these two areas, and there were these weird zoning laws, and somehow a park got built there. I think it wasn't really zoned for a park. It's just a weird thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of I don't know, it's almost a little bit industrial, the area. It's not very heavily populated by residential houses. I'm not sure.
Well, it became a mecca, kind of overrun with teenagers who wanted to party. It was the mecca for you were looking for a place to go drink and party and have sex. Do it at the park.
Having a fire in the woods or behind the park or something, that's not new. These kids didn't invent that. Teenagers and young people have been looking for places to go hump each other since the dawn of mankind. You know what I'm saying? Oh yeah. Yeah, how you think they figured out they could live in caves?
Yeah,
Some
well-
teenagers were necking in a cave one day.
Like drugs and alcohol were pretty common at the park, and it wasn't like there were going to be cops around, so these kids could drink out in the open, raise hell, and nobody was, going to intervene, right? A group of drug dealers were known to hang out at the park. They wore hand-painted jackets featuring pentagrams and called themselves Knights of the Black Circle. Yet none of these kids were actually into, like, dark occult types of things.
So they were just down with the aesthetic.
They were, and they were actually more like kind of hippie kids, like, free love, peace kind of kids. But this was an image to kind of make them look tougher so they could sell their marijuana and stuff, right? And it was merely just an image thing. Yet Ricky was actually into this kind of thing. Like, he was really interested in Satanism. He started hanging around at the park, preaching about Satan to the other kids, who mostly thought he was just ridiculous. Like, they all think, he's just doing this for attention, or, wow, this guy's, he's just being extra.
Can you imagine this kid like on a soapbox, literally on a soapbox, carrying on about Satan?
Once he carved Satin, Satin, into a picnic table, and everyone laughed at him for the misspelling.
Yeah.
People were making fun, like there was all this graffiti around town that's like Satin lives.
That's one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
Yeah. I mean, there's a documentary that we watched for this case. It's called The Acid King. So it was one of our resources for today. And many of the people who were interviewed are now, middle age.
Right.
They're now adults. And they were laughing like, yeah, he, satin was carved into stuff and spray painted. And we all just thought this guy's an idiot.
And they knew it was him because of the misspelling.
Yes. Ricky was socially isolated. He tried hanging out with some of the other misfit kids at the park, some of those Black Circle Knights or whatever. And, many of these guys were just sitting around playing guitars, talking about music, just kind of chill. And then here would come Ricky like, the devil lives or whatever. No. And they just didn't like his vibe. And let's be real, Dylan. Okay, first of all, kids are mean. Kids are just mean.
Well, they are.
And two, kids have this way, I think, of sniffing out bullshit. And they can smell a poser or like a try-hard from a mile away.
They really can.
And they're going to rag on their peer who is trying so hard to be like an edgelord, right?
Well, it's kids are no different. They're just little adults. They really are just little adults, and they have adult tendencies. And I think it's something we see a lot. If someone's just trying so hard, when they leave the cocktail party or whatever, or the potluck, everybody just rolls their eyes like, oh my God, give me a break.
Yeah. Well, they would run Ricky off when he would start talking about Satan. I mean, they just thought, this guy is an idiot. He's ridiculous. Like, we don't have time for his bullshit. In December of 1981, someone burnt a goat fetus in the park's gazebo, which kind of started this satanic panic in town in Northport, though Ricky was not responsible.
Okay, where did you get the goat fetus?
I don't know.
At the goat fetus store? What the hell?
Ricky's only friend was Jimmy, who by now has dropped out of school and has had multiple run-ins with law enforcement. And I mean, Ricky has friends, like, I use that term loosely, like acquaintances, but Jimmy's like his only true kind of friend, like a ride or die bestie, right?
Well, the other friends are someone he would smoke a joint with.
Yeah, exactly.
Or share his pod or get them to share their what they have. But that's not a real friend.
No. When Ricky was living at home, things weren't going well because, again, he's kind of in and out of his house. His parents kick him out, and he lives on the streets for a couple weeks or a month and then comes back home promising he's going to get his shit together.
Right.
Never happens. So by now, he's kind of living back at home. Things just aren't going that well for him. At school, he would get into fights. And by March of 1982, he had been suspended 5 times for fighting. He was also arrested for stealing a teacher's checkbook.
Oh, damn, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that would have me hot.
Well, Lynn and Dick were hot because, again, they're teachers. And he's misbehaving. He's acting out, getting into all this trouble at school. And they feel like it's reflecting poorly on them.
Right. They just got this out of control kid. You know, people are talking, and I guess they're embarrassed a little bit, I'm sure.
Lynn and Dick asked the school if they would declare Ricky as, quote, emotionally handicapped so they could put him in a specialized private school. St. Francis Academy in Lake Placid, New York, was nearly 300 miles away from Northport, and the Kassos thought the distance, coupled with the school's programs, which really focused on emotionally troubled children, would help get their son on the right track. But on the day of the admissions interview, Ricky ran away from home. Like, they go to get in the car, and he just takes off running.
Again, it's the same old song and dance with him. They're trying something. They're trying to think outside the box as educators. Hey, he's obviously having trouble. He can't get his shit together. Let's approach it from in a new light, maybe with some specialized, people around him to understand where he's coming from, and he doesn't want anything to do with it.
He was gone for 17 days.
Damn.
At this time. When he finally returns, the school refuses to grant Ricky another interview. I mean, they're like, this is a kid who's obviously not interested in bettering himself.
Yeah.
And we don't have room for him at the school.
And they know
we don't need him to come here and cause problems.
He looks like trouble. And I don't say, and I don't know what to say.
Ricky started spending a lot of time in an area known as Aztecia Woods. It was a secluded place where many teenagers partied. There was an old foundation to what was rumored to have been a church, and Ricky liked to stay there. When he was kicked out of the house, he would build big bonfires, take drugs, and he told others it's where he communed with Satan.
Oh, gosh.
He claimed on his many acid trips that the devil would visit him in the form of a tree or sometimes a crow.
Oh.
Look at Bush over. It's the devil.
We'll talk a little bit more about these hallucinations.
Look how that yellow bell bush is looking at me. That's the devil.
So Jimmy was arrested on third-degree trespassing charges, and then 3 more times after that he was arrested, and he had dropped out of school. So again, Ricky's kind of lost his friend. It made him less interested in attending school. Jimmy's kind of in and out of jail, like juvenile jail. So Ricky kind of doesn't really have any body to count on.
Right.
Dick Kasso had kicked Ricky out of the house again. I mean, he's just kind of in a really low spot. Ricky's friend Dave Johnson said, quote, Dick Kasso had no business being a father.
Yeah, and I've seen parents like that. They're just super cold. I'm not saying I was a perfect parent by far, but you just see some people and you're like, they shouldn't raise a den of snakes is what they say, things like that down here in the South. So
here's Ricky, on his own, doesn't really have anyone in his corner, and he meets a man in his 30s, a Vietnam vet named Pat Toussaint, and Pat had PTSD from the war. His nickname was Pagan Pat, Father Time, and some people called him Grandpa Dirt because he had like this really long, shaggy gray beard. Like, so when you think of Father Time,
right,
this guy like fit the description.
No, I gotta say, we were watching that documentary, and I gotta say the nicknames kind of all of them fit him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Pat was into the occult as well, so Ricky and Pat bonded over Satanism. The two began hanging out regularly. Ricky would sell Pat drugs. Pat was an alcoholic who was prescribed Librium for his PTSD. And from what I understand, it was kind of like a mild sedative, but if mixed with like alcohol, it could have like maybe a hallucinogenic kind of property. So to get money for the drugs, Pat would sell this medication to teenagers. Because they're just looking to get loaded. So they're like, okay, we'll take this and drink a beer. Woo,
They just want to feel funny.
Yeah. And it was obvious to most everyone that Ricky's obsession with Satanism was mostly like to intimidate his enemies. To like make people afraid of him.
So he's creating an image.
Yeah. Some friends thought Ricky was truly like troubled and needed help, psychiatric help. And they suggested he see a guy in town named Tony Rugi who worked at The Place. And The Place was a spot in town for teenagers. It offered like counseling services, guidance, and it was just kind of like a safe place for kids to go hang out. Board games and couches and magazines.
Yeah, or if you need someone to talk to.
Yeah.
These are kids who might not have someone to talk to or lean on or get advice from. And I think every place, every area needs places like this.
Tony, people called him the ponytail guy, because he was a cool guy with a ponytail. And he was a pretty sincere guy. He was able to make strong connections with young people. So a lot of Ricky's friends felt like Tony could help him. And that Tony was a guy maybe Ricky could bond with or, whatever. Ricky was frustrated about his situation, being homeless. He was confused, that his parents didn't really want him around, and finally decides to drop in at the place to talk to Tony. So in early 1983, Ricky, though not an official client of the place, he begins confiding in Tony. Tony thought Ricky was a kind, articulate, and intelligent, struggling young man. Ricky would tell Tony that he wanted to stop taking drugs and get back into school, but Tony could see that Ricky wasn't really taking the steps to make this happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Tony would be like, okay, well, we need to talk about setting goals and like what steps you need to take. And that's when Ricky would be like, well, So he could see Ricky wasn't serious about making changes.
Yeah, at every level, even small changes, you got to be on. You got to do the work. You got to make the change. No one can change it for you.
And once again, Ricky is allowed back home because he promises he will return to school. The Kassos enrolled him at Comic High School in a special section for troubled kids. However, Ricky was soon cutting classes, and that leads to another expulsion. Running out of options, the Kassos approached police asking for help. They wanted to get Ricky committed to a psychiatric hospital, explaining how their son was a drug addict, obsessed with Satan, and how the family feared his violent outbursts. He was finally committed on March 22nd, 1983 to South Oaks Hospital, which was located in Amityville.
Oh, wow.
His parents used their life savings to fund the hospitalization because it cost over $300 a day and was not covered by their insurance.
Damn, $300 a day back then?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. So they're they're using their life savings. Retirement money, what they have,
Trying everything they can to get him some help. Schools back in the day did not play. I think maybe we're missing that to a degree in the modern day. It's like, what do you want us to do with this kid who continues bullying or just being a total piece of shit kid, ruining the education process for everyone involved, teachers, staff, other students. Back in the day, it was like 3 strikes and you're out. You did some crazy shit, you were gone. That school's like, no, you've been expelled. You will never attend here again. And that got rid of the shitty kid that was affecting everybody. I mean, is that a hard stance to take?
Well, no.
When everyone tries and tries and tries and tries and they will not, they absolutely
but you're always
refuse.
Have those, but the poor kid needs an education.
Well, maybe he doesn't. Well, no, he needs it. Yeah, I agree, but he doesn't want it, guys. He doesn't want it.
I'm not the person to ask.
Or she doesn't want it.
I'm bitchy.
They don't want it. Yeah, I know.
While at the hospital, Ricky attempts suicide. He was diagnosed as a manic depressive, and they prescribed him lithium. In the 11 weeks that he's in this treatment program, he runs away from the hospital 5 times.
My God.
Finally, Ricky realized that in order to get released from this hospital, he needs to manipulate the doctors. So he starts telling them what they want to hear. He tells them he's going to stop worshiping Satan, he's going to quit partying, and he will return to school. It worked, and in no time, Ricky is released to his parents.
I don't even like Satan anymore.
Yeah, pretty much.
That Satan, he's a bad dude.
Yeah. That's, yes, absolutely. I kind of like, I'm going to get a shirt that says Satan's a bad dude. Yet, his behavior continued to decline. Playing a prank, this is like right after he's released from the hospital and he's attempted suicide. He plays a prank on his mom. Ricky covers his wrists in ketchup and stages a scene to look like he's killed himself.
Oh my gosh.
So when his mother discovers her son in this, she starts freaking out, crying, panicking. Ricky just jumps up and starts laughing maniacally. That's when Lynn's like, I've had enough, and she kicks him out of the house again.
It's like he doesn't want to be in the house. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense.
Well, he wants to be in the house doing
Exactly what he wants.
He wants to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. After a few months, Ricky grows tired of sleeping on friends' couches. He's sleeping in like playhouses in the backyard, garages,
Sheds.
tunnels, sewer at the sewer treatment facility.
God.
Shacks in the woods.
Damn, Ricky goes hard.
Yeah. He makes amends with his parents, and in June 1983, just in time to go to the summer vacation up in the mountains at his family's cabin, he makes amends. Isn't that convenient?
Yeah, I want to go to the cabin.
I'm going to have a vacation, so I'm going to clean up my act.
It was like winter's coming.
Which just shows that he's capable of doing this.
Yeah.
But he only does it when it's something, benefits him.
Yeah,
like he wants to go on vacation.
I bet he was on a good behavior during the winter up there.
No, that's when he's wilding out.
Oh, he don't even give a damn. All he needs is a scarf and a pair of gloves.
Shortly afterwards, Ricky starts using angel dust. Now, he would go to cemeteries, smoke angel dust, and chant, Satan, Satan, Satan.
Hey, I didn't really mean it when I said you was a bad dude.
Ricky would tell his friends that the devil came to him in the form of a tree, but then would say, I don't like to talk about it. People think I'm nuts.
Yeah. They certainly do, sir.
Described now as always having a spaced out look, Ricky wanted people to think he was a crazy Satanist. He was the OG edgelord, Dylan. He really was. A friend named Anthony Zinkus said, quote, there's a power trip in Satanism. It says now you can strike back at people that screwed you up. A friend told Ricky, quote, do too many drugs and you'll be dead soon. And Ricky said, yeah, that's exactly what I want.
Oh, wow.
Ricky had also told Lynn, his mother, that death would be the ultimate high.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. While Ricky and Jimmy were troubled teenagers, there was another young man in town who was also having problems.
Okay.
Gary Lowers was born April 30th of 1967. He was the third and final child born to parents who were Belgian immigrants. There was like a 14-year age gap between Gary and his oldest sister, Nicole. So she became a bit of like a second mother to him. Gary failed to connect with his older brother, Michael, due to the age difference. So it's kind of like growing up as an only child because there's this big age difference.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Gary's father was a Manhattan banker, and this is a guy who, he immigrated over and started out kind of with nothing and worked his way up to this prestigious banking job where he was making really good money. And he sent his son to school dressed nicely in like turtleneck sweaters and sports coats.
Was he a sports announcer?
Penny loafers and slacks. Of course, Gary was immediately bullied by the other kids who were dressed more casually, in like jeans and t-shirts and sneakers.
Hey, penny loafer, who you supposed to be?
Yeah, they were just like, he immediately like, this kid's a dork.
And I think it's an okay way to dress personally. I might lean prep now and again, but especially when I was younger.
Dude, you're preppy.
You think so?
Yeah, when I met you, like you only owned like polo shirts.
Well, that's because I was so fat. It's about the only thing that fit me.
Yeah, but even when you pick out clothes, you go for like, oh look, it's a Ralph Lauren. Oh look at this chaps button up.
That's because I never had that stuff
kind of preppy
growing up, and now I want to treat myself.
I'm like, you don't want to wear this black fishnet shirt, Dylan, with a skull necklace
and some flames.
Yeah,
you got it at the flea market.
Just some nipple rings.
Oh yeah. I want some clams.
Gary constantly tried to fit in from an early age, but failed to really find his tribe, as they say. Kids would say Gary was trying too hard, which got him picked on even more. So from an early age, Gary is kind of a follower, willing to do whatever it takes to fit in. He's just desperately like trying to find some people that will be his friends.
I've never understood this about kids. Someone's trying their damnedest. They're changing the way they look, the way they talk and act just to be your buddy. Like, couldn't you be like, well, damn, I guess this person needs a friend, maybe. Why you got to attack them and be so hardcore?
I don't know, Dylan. Why couldn't you be their friend?
I was everybody's friend. Yeah, I floated between the groups. I was an emissary.
I would have hated you.
You wouldn't have hated me.
Get away from me, stupid.
I would have made you.
You're trying to be my friend.
I would have made you laugh.
People try to be my friend, I'm immediately suspicious.
I'd be like, hey, you little,
Like, what do you want?
hey, you little toe-headed girl, what's your story?
And I just hiss at you.
Yeah. I'd be like, ooh, I like her.
So he was also a kid that just never thought of consequences. After years of trying to fit in through sports and that kind of thing, Gary finds drugs. And drugs and alcohol were an automatic way to fit in with a certain group, like these dirtbag kids.
Now, I will say they will let you settle in quicker than any other group, the ones that use substances.
Yeah, so then it was like, hey, if Gary shows up at school with a joint, then he's got 4 or 5 friends who want to smoke the joint with him.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Gary had also learned to overcompensate with a sense of humor. He was a bit of a class clown, but a lot of times his bullies didn't appreciate Gary's jokes or didn't really understand his sense of humor. You know?
which is great.
One classmate said, quote, he was like one of those little yippy dogs. You'd want to tell him to stop talking and everyone will stop being mean to you.
Now, I've run across this before growing up. As someone, you're like, damn, dude, you're making it easy because you're kind of a dick. You know what I mean? You're like
You're just a doober.
you're like, yeah, did you look in the mirror when you
Well,
left?
when you're talking about this guy just desperately wants to be, you know, everyone's friend, and I'm like, yeah, but it sounds like he's kind of annoying and
Yeah. They try way too hard.
Yeah.
They laugh too hard at the jokes. It's just too
hey
much.
guys, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's exactly.
Can I hang out? Yeah.
I got a joint.
Yeah. So Gary was getting into trouble too. In 1982, Gary robbed 2 older boys and stole microdots from them. In August of 1983, Gary pulled a BB gun on a group of young kids in an effort to rob them. A few days later, he burned a friend with the hot end of a marijuana pipe at least a dozen times.
Damn.
He was arrested and sent to jail. They ended up giving him 5 years probation for this assault.
Well, that's pretty hardcore. That's pretty brutal.
But this is the kind of thing Gary did. Like, he doesn't have a sense of consequences, and he burns the hell out of his friend, not thinking that, like, well, 1, I shouldn't do this to my friend, and 2, I can get in trouble for this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like he doesn't see what's wrong with it. Like, oh, I was just being funny, guys.
Yeah, like you thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then in September, he was arrested for criminal menacing in that BB gun attack and was given another year of probation.
Criminal menacing.
Yeah.
Well, he is a menace. I mean, you're trying to make people think you got a real gun. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
To do an armed robbery. I mean, this is a lot.
Yeah, and he's like trying to steal like kids' bikes or something. I mean, something really stupid. You know, like, hey, you little 9-year-old, let me have that tricycle. I'm gonna shoot you with this gun. I mean, it's just dumb shit that
It's
he's
going to
doing.
sting if you're up close.
Gary spent a lot of time at Lace's skating rink, which was another local hangout for teenagers. Parents thought Lace's was like a good, safe place for young people. The rink hosted these all-night skate-a-thons and lock-ins. Parents had no idea how easy it was for these teens to come and go from the rink. They would sneak in booze and drugs. They would go out in the parking lot and have sex.
And I'm sure none of the kids were telling the parents this stuff's happening.
No. But he met a guy at the rink named Johnny Hayward who would become his best friend. And because Gary was always doing dumb stuff and getting his ass kicked, Johnny kind of became a bit of his protector because Johnny was a fighter. Johnny said he always went out looking to like have a fight, get drunk, and get laid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In that order?
Yeah, and if he didn't get to do these things, it was like not a good night.
What happened? Well, I only got drunk and only had a fight. I did not get laid.
So again, Johnny kind of takes over being like Gary's protector, and being friends with him, Gary got his ass kicked a little bit less. Gary was also breaking into houses, and at one point, he broke into a home and stole like $4,000 in cash.
Damn.
Yeah, he took some friends to buy dirt bikes. He walked in the skating rink and handed another kid $500 and said, "Have a good night."
Oh, damn, dude.
He bought his ex-girlfriend a gold necklace. She still rejected him.
But she kept the herringbone.
He bought some really expensive boombox. And then he took $1,000 in cash and threw it up in the air at the skating rink and let it rain down so people could like pick the money up, and everybody thought Gary was cool.
And that's it. That made him a legend, right? I mean, that's something that people will never forget.
It didn't matter that he knew like he was breaking into friends' houses, And he always acted like he didn't see a problem with this, stealing from friends and people he knew. He just didn't seem like, what's wrong with that?
Well, what's the big deal?
Yeah. Gary's burglary problem landed him in trouble, and his father took these actions as like a personal insult. Like, not only are you committing these crimes, but you're like, look what you're doing to me. You know, your dad who's worked hard and provided for you.
Well, you're making us look like shit. I mean, he's the honor of the family, if you will.
Well, yeah, because Herbert Lauers, I mean, he's like got this really old school kind of European view. He's very strict. He's like believes you work hard, you're going to succeed. He's lived the American dream.
You don't take from others.
He's, so he doesn't understand. Like, I've tried to provide this good life for you. Why are you out doing these things? I mean, he really, it takes this, personally.
How do we go from sports coats and penny loafers to burglary?
Right. So Gary's family starts going to counseling together. His problems were sort of chalked up to issues with his peers. And while Gary's friends were bad influences, they were kind of the only friends he had. So what was he supposed to do? Hey, what am I supposed to do here?
Hey, I'm stealing over here.
I don't see the problem. It's just fun, man.
I was just kidding when I held that hot stuff to your skin.
Yeah, it's funny. Ricky and Gary, they'd met while playing football, and though they knew each other, Gary was somewhat afraid of Ricky. Gary was an easy target. As I mentioned, he's kind of always getting his ass kicked, and Ricky was crazy. He was always rambling about Satan, doing drugs, just kind of out there, and Gary was afraid of Ricky. Like, even though they were kind of buddies, Gary was just sort of like, hey man, don't kill me.
Well, it's like join them instead of getting beat up by them.
Yeah. After spending the winter months living outside, Ricky developed a severe bronchial infection, and it was actually a neighbor who found him sick and called Dick Kasso and demanded, you'd better do something about your son's health.
Damn.
Yeah, whatever your feelings are about what he's done, this is your child.
So Ricky's in bad shape.
Yeah. So at first, Dick hangs the phone up on this guy, but then later agrees that he will take Ricky to the doctor. Ricky agreed to attend the Washington Learning Center in Deer Park and clean up his act in order to have a place to stay. But it didn't take long for Ricky to get suspended from that school for skipping classes. And he started taking 10 hits of acid at a time. He had built up to 10 hits at a time.
And that's going to make everything better.
Yeah. By now, he's earned the nickname the Acid King because Ricky was just always tripping. Taking 10 hits of acid every few hours. I don't even know how that's possible, dude.
Well, I'll tell you one thing from my experience with limited experience with psychedelics. Part of it's he's burning up the stuff that the serotonin and such that these things need to activate. So at a certain point, he's kind of wasting the acid. You know what I'm saying? But still, to the other kids, they're like, "Whoa, this guy, he's." Well,
and not only is he taking 10 hits of acid at a time, but he's using angel dust. So he's combining these drugs and using them at the same time.
And I have no idea what that does.
Ricky was making trips into the Bronx to buy angel dust and then selling angel dust to the teens in Northport to fund his habit. So it was just kind of this cycle of get the drugs, sell some drugs,
do some
make
drugs,
enough money to buy the drugs that I'm going to do.
Right.
Yeah. The PCP was a pretty significant source of income for him. He was making pretty decent money. Enough money that he could, get a bagel, a hot dog, some more acid.
Yeah, well, I was going to say he's probably going to buy more acid.
Ricky decided at some point that he wants to dig up a colonial era grave in order to get a human skull for a ritual.
Now, I got to say, this is thinking outside of the box.
Now, he didn't get the skull, but he was arrested and charged with violating public health law and was given a June 18th court date. So this is 1984.
So he attempts to dig up a very old grave.
Yeah.
And he gets nothing out of it. But from all accounts, he dug a big hole. He dug a lot, 6 or 7 feet down. And in that documentary, one of his friends was like, dude, that like those bones are probably gone. You know what I mean? They're like dust now. What are you doing? What are you going to do with the skull if you even get it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, this is totally weird to everyone. Like, why is he doing this type of stuff?
And the grave robbing made the local news, which further fueled this satanic panic that had been going on in town. People were so concerned there was some kind of teen satanic death cult in town, right?
Well, they've already burned a goat fetus.
Yeah. And somebody's been writing Satan everywhere.
Yeah, and they're waiting for the Lord of Satin to return.
Now Ricky had a full-fledged reputation as a devil worshiper, and this made a lot of young people avoid him altogether, and a lot of the parents, because up until now, some people felt sorry for him. They would let him crash on the couch, in the basement, in a spare bedroom.
Or around their other kids, other young people.
Yeah, and now these parents are like, this guy's a weirdo. Like, we don't want him in our house.
And a grave robber.
Yeah, and other kids that might have been friends with Ricky or offered him a place to stay, they're like, this is a little step too far, bud.
So his world's gotten even smaller now.
Yes. On April 21st of 1984, on my 4th birthday, Ricky attended a party at Dave Johnson's house. When Ricky passed out, Gary Lowers stole 10 bags of angel dust out of Ricky's pocket. Gary figured he'd never get caught. But the following morning, Ricky found Gary, confronted him over the theft. He punched Gary in the face and told him he had 2 weeks to pay for the dust and that it would cost $50.
So in Gary's mind, being a known thief, being known to everyone around him that he doesn't mind stealing from friends and people he knows, takes this off Ricky thinking he'll never, ever suspect me.
Right.
And Ricky basically wakes up, sees it's gone out of his pocket, and probably thinks, I bet Gary took it.
Yeah, because even though, Ricky's hanging out with these, quote, dirtbag kids, most of them are not thieves, and they're not willing to, steal from their buddies.
Right. When you could just buy it, or he'll probably share some with you.
Right. So Ricky and Pat, remember Graveyard Dirt, Grandpa Dirt, whatever his name is, Father Time?
The weird old guys hanging out with these kids?
The weird old, the goth Wooderson.
He's like a Gandalf from Temu.
Yeah, he is. So Temu Gandalf and Ricky decide on April 30th of 1984 that they want to celebrate Walpurgis Night or Walpurgis Night.
Okay.
Some kind of pagan holiday. It almost sounds like Beltane, like a welcoming of spring, that kind of thing. So they go to the Amityville house, and they think they're going to perform some kind of ritual. That's why they needed the skull.
Oh, this all adds up now.
Because if they go to the Amityville house and they've got a skull, they're going to be able to summon Satan, or at least maybe the murdered DeFeo family. So they don't have the skull, but they go to the house anyway, and then they just hoot and holler for a few minutes, and nothing happens.
Damn it.
Lucifer does not show up.
We needed the skull.
There were no demons, no ghosts.
No demigods even.
So they were unable to raise any demonic spirits, and they just leave after a few minutes, disappointed that the summoning didn't go that well.
And this grown-ass man going around with this young person.
Oh, come on.
This is the plan.
You would go try to summon a demon out at the Amityville house. Don't lie.
No, I would never.
I don't believe you.
No, I mean, come on. You're going to get something dark at the Amityville house. I mean, I guess that's what they're after.
Well, hell yeah, I know. That's the point. Hell, I go hang out with Ricky and Pat.
I would not. I would be afraid Pat has hepatitis.
Look, I want to go just for a social study.
Oh, okay. You just want to watch these dumbasses.
Yeah, I'm a sociologist and it's for science.
Okay.
Now, Ricky calls home on May 3rd asking if he can return. He says he thinks he has pneumonia, needs to see a doctor. Dick Kasso agrees to allow his son to come home if Ricky will check into a hospital and, quote, get help for the drug issues. While at the hospital, he's treated for pneumonia and spends the next 3 days getting psychiatric evaluations. Doctors determine that Ricky is not psychotic, but they say he suffers from an antisocial personality. When the doctors ask Ricky about the possibility of going to jail on the grave robbing charge, he tells them if they put him in jail, he's going to commit suicide.
Oh. Because that's what a completely stable person says.
Ricky declines to be committed and is discharged. The psychiatrists tell Ricky's parents he's not a danger to anyone.
Okay.
Gary, now he still owes Ricky money. Gary had taken a dishwashing job at a restaurant but got fired for dyeing his hair pink. Therefore, he's short on cash. And when Ricky gets out of the hospital, they bump into each other at the park. And that's when Ricky punches Gary a few times.
So,
Pay me my money, bitch. And like punches him.
yeah, after 3 behind the gym, we're going to fight. So he hasn't forgotten about the debt.
Right.
And Ricky's kind of in a low spot as well. He doesn't have a lot going on. So he wants that money.
I want my $2. He's like those paper boys in Better Off Dead.
So he wants his money or else.
Bitch better have my money. Yeah. Rihanna wrote that song about Ricky. Wants his money. Jimmy also joins in beating up Gary, and they rip up his faux leather jacket.
Oh, man. Cold-blooded.
Ricky has started making like 2 to 3 trips a week to the Bronx to buy angel dust. So he's like even amping up the amount of drugs he's using.
Oh, my God, this is not good.
He's sinking deeper into depression, into drug use, and this obsession he has with the occult. Finally, Gary pays Ricky $30 after being beaten up several times. Ricky, during this period, finds out that his parents had a huge yard sale and sold off all of his belongings.
Oh.
And he's pretty upset about it.
Well, I thought you guys would keep holding that for me while I was out here finding myself.
Yeah, he also finds out, like, his parents gave his room to one of his sisters.
Well, you're not using it, Ricky.
Ricky is also having a hard time finding a place to crash because most of the town knows about the grave robbing and the Satanism, and they don't want him in their homes. Pat and Ricky also end their friendship. Some have suggested that Pat made sexual advances toward Ricky. So after a violent altercation, they are never seen together again. But there's no confirmation that that's really what happened. That was just kind of the speculation.
Right.
Or, what they out here saying.
He tried to rub his dry, crusty beard on Ricky, and Ricky wasn't having it.
Yeah. Ricky done lost your number. Now, people around town notice a change in Ricky. So instead of speaking to friends when he's walking around, hanging out, kind of, hey, man, what's up,
Hey, you need any acid?
Yeah. Ricky's now kind of walking around like a zombie, and he's talking to himself. Ricky had also lost 40 pounds because he wasn't eating, and partially that was because of the drug use, because he's amped up the drug use so much, he's like just so fucked up he doesn't even think to eat anymore. And, he doesn't always have food money.
Damn.
Because he's a kid. Ricky would tell his friends during brief moments of, kind of being with it, that he wanted to kill someone.
So he's going around muttering to himself. He's getting weirder and weirder. Mm-hmm. Even the weird kids think he's weird now. And now he's talking about...
and he looks like shit.
He looks like shit.
He's like super skinny.
Right.
Sunken in eyes.
Strung out
like
on...
a skeleton.
Yeah.
He's kind of a tall, gangly guy anyway. Just like lumbering around. High as hell.
Jesus.
Like Jack Skellington, jumping around.
Like a fucked up Jack Skellington.
Yeah.
Damn.
Finally, during the 3rd week of June, Ricky manages to get $30 from Gary, but still beats him up because he wants that missing 20.
See,
$20.
I'm just going to remind you that you still owe me 20, and he kicks him.
Yeah, so on June 17th, Gary and Johnny had stolen some car stereos. Gary pocketed the cash. He paid some of the money to Ricky. He gave him that $30. And the rest, he just stiffed from his friend. And Johnny's his best friend, kind of like his only real friend. And Johnny's upset, and it's the first time that he hits Gary.
Okay.
And he's kind of like, I see why everybody kicks your ass.
Yeah, because I'm going to kick your ass because you're a dick.
So they had a bit of a fight, and they don't talk, right, after this. Ricky then decides he's going to pay a visit to Gary's mother, Yvonne Lowers, and explains to her that Gary owes him $50. So she pays Ricky the money. So now Ricky has made about $80, but he's still pissed off about this $20 that Gary owes him, even though he's made
more
money.
Okay.
He's made $30 more than what is owed to him.
So really now it's just about you having stolen it from me.
Yeah.
I'm going to fuck with you.
On June 18th, Ricky has a court date over the grave robbing charges. At first, his parents act like they don't want to go with him to court. But I guess Dick finally agrees to go to court with his son. And after the hearing, Dick Kasso drops Ricky off in front of the local head shop, which is called the Midway. It's kind of hangout for some people in town. While they're standing out there, Ricky asks his dad for 25 cents for a quarter so he can get a bagel because he's hungry and he hasn't eaten anything. Dick refuses to give his son any money. And in a fit of rage, Ricky starts kicking the door of Dick's 1977 Corvette. Dick drives away mad, but returns about 20 minutes later and throws $2 on the ground and tells Ricky he never wants to see him again.
Ah, damn.
Yeah.
So just another, he's just spiraling down.
So Gary finally tracks down Ricky on June 19th to pay that remaining $20. And he's hoping to repair their fractured friendship. Gary was toying with the idea of leaving Long Island, maybe joining the army. Gary finds Ricky at New Park and offers to pay him the $20, but Ricky turns the money down and instead offers Gary some microdots. And he gladly accepts the drugs.
Oh, so it's like, oh, don't worry about it, bro. It's cool now.
Yeah, so now they're over here thinking they're taking mescaline. They're really taking the PCP acid mix
And
or whatever.
strychnine. Yeah.
Yeah. Gary is joined by Jimmy and another kid named Albert Quinones. Now, Albert does not like Gary and has beaten him up in the past.
God, man. Gary's like the chicken of the teenage world. Everything kicks his ass.
It's true. Now, they ask Gary if he wants to join them at Aztecia Woods, where they can party. But at first, Gary isn't really interested. And then Ricky offers to buy him some jelly donuts at Dunkin'.
Shit, say less.
I know, this seals the deal. So they make their way to the donut place. They get their donuts, and then they head to the woods. And as they're walking down the path, 3 black crows fly overhead, and Ricky tells the group, Satan is with us.
You see that bush over there? I said devil.
It's burning.
I can see the fire.
You see that squirrel right there? That's the demon.
He's nutty. Stupid, dude. What the hell's wrong with these kids?
Okay.
Or these young people?
Well, now we're fast forwarding to Sunday, July 1st of 1984, around 4:45 p.m. 54-year-old Lieutenant Larry Springsteen with the Northport Village Police Department is on duty, answers a call. A voice says, there's a body in the woods behind Gunther's tap room. And then hangs up.
So I'm sure that gets his attention.
Gunther's was a well-known tap room in town. It's popular among the residents and is considered one of Jack Kerouac's favorite drinking spots. So that also kind of, gave it some cred. Visitors want to come there because, that's where Kerouac would drink, right?
Okay.
Springsteen wasn't aware of any missing persons cases and kind of considered the call was likely a prank. The voice of the young woman on the other end, he felt like was probably a teenager. But either way, if there was a body in the woods and the police didn't follow up, he knew there would be hell to pay.
Well, yeah, and that's a good way to think about it. Hey, this could be some BS, but I'm going to go check it out anyway.
He calls an off-duty officer named Gene Romer, who was a 20-year veteran with a proven track record. He's kind of like one of the top cops at the station. Romer and Springsteen did a cursory search of the property behind Gunther's. There was no body. The next day, the men thought they would follow up with the investigation. However, another call came in on the Monday morning from a Sister Mary James, head nun at Madonna Heights School for Girls in Dix Hills. One of the school's students, a 15-year-old girl named Jean Wells, had returned from the weekend with quite a story. The shaken young girl had confided that a teenager named Gary Lowers had been murdered, then buried in a place called Aztecia Woods.
Damn.
When the call ended, the officers alerted their police chief, who had taken a month off for vacation, just to put him in the loop. That hey, we got this call. We don't know.
Could be a mess.
Yeah. Could be nothing. Raumer's first move was to drive over to the Lowers residence on West Scudder Place to see if Gary was missing. Yvonne Lowers told the officers that she had not seen her son for quite some time, though this was not unusual. Sometimes she didn't speak to her son for 2 to 3 weeks. And due to his legal troubles, troubles, Herbert Lowers didn't even want her mentioning Gary's name in the house.
Damn.
So she's actually talking to police outside. She won't even let them come in because she's like, we can't talk about this in front of my husband.
He doesn't want to hear it.
Romer told her that the only way that he could investigate is if there was a missing persons report filed. And he tries to talk her into this, saying, well, it doesn't do any harm for us to file a report. If Gary turns up, it's no big deal. He's a minor, so it's not like this is going to get released to the public. So she is persuaded to just go ahead and fill out the paperwork. Because, he's thinking, this will give me the authority to really look into this tip.
Start asking questions.
Yeah.
And start looking into his background.
With the proper documentation in hand, Romer then went to question Gene Wells. When he arrives at the private school, Gene's parents are there, and they're angry at their daughter, asking, what did you do wrong now? Because, all these kids be doing wrong, I guess. Because of Satan.
It's a Satan squirrel.
Romer explained their daughter had actually done something courageous by reporting a possible crime. Then he sat down to learn what Gene Wells had been so upset about. So the day before, on July 1st, Gene had gone to the movie theater in Northport with a friend named Karen. Karen's boyfriend, Jimmy Triano, known as Drac, Drac had made the girl kind of feel ill at ease. I mean, not only did his physical appearance frighten her, but she knew he had this reputation for dealing drugs and being involved in criminal activities, which is kind of a no good.
A shitbird.
No good, low down, cheap little punk. When Jean asked about Jimmy's best friend, Ricky, just trying to make conversation, she's like, oh, how's Ricky? I haven't seen him for a while. Jimmy said casually, oh, he just killed someone named Gary.
Damn. Yet another case of young people just going around nonchalantly describing murder.
Oh, yeah. Just wait. So Jean knew Gary Lowers well. They had been friendly since elementary school, and that was the only Gary she really knew of. So she asks Jimmy, is it Gary Lowers? And Jimmy says yes. Then he offers to show the girls Gary's body. He went on to explain there was a bad drug deal between Gary and Ricky. They had gone along with Albert Quinones to the woods, and that they stabbed him to death.
Yeah,
just, whatevs.
No big deal.
Karen was laughing because she's not believing this is real. I mean, she's like, oh, he's such a jokester. But Jean, so, of course, when she hears this, Jean kind of relaxes a little bit, thinking, okay, maybe it is a joke. But while they're sitting through the movie, she just can't shake this bad feeling.
Right.
Right? She skipped out after the movie. She goes home, and that's when she calls Yvonne Lowers, who confirms that she's not spoken to her son in 2 weeks.
So he really is missing.
So now Jean is freaked out. Romer then contacts the Suffolk County Police Department to see if they would assist in a search. They turned down this request, telling him that teenage gossip didn't warrant their intervention. But Romer goes ahead and schedules a search of Aztecia Woods for the following afternoon. Now, after speaking to Gene Wells, and she agrees to take a polygraph test, the Suffolk County law enforcement, like the police department there, they find her to be credible. So they agree, okay, we'll help you in this search. So now you got the two departments that are going to aid in this search effort.
Okay.
They're going to bring, the dogs out, everything. Now, unfortunately, this first search comes up empty. Thunderstorms had washed away any scent as search dogs tried to key in. After a frustrating effort, law enforcement decides they'll just return the next day. Maybe they'll have better luck. So on the 4th of July, investigators were again combing the woods, and it didn't take long for the cadaver dogs to find what they were looking for. Embedded in the dirt, one of the dogs found a blood-soaked scalp.
Oh my gosh.
The dog was pulled away and the crime lab notified. The forensics team only had to dig about an inch of soil to recover a decaying corpse lying beneath. It's just been covered with dirt and leaves.
So,
it's just a very makeshift grave.
Very, very shallow grave. Not even a grave. It sounds more like it was an indentation in the ground and they just kind of threw stuff over him.
Yeah.
Right.
Pretty much. As more dirt is removed, the scene became increasingly grim. Gary's head had all but rotted away, leaving little more than a skull, and it was lying down next to a pair of feet.
Damn.
Their first thought was that this boy had been decapitated. Like someone has cut his head off, right? Because this is so bizarre. Exiting the woods, Romer and other detectives began the task of trying to find Ricky, Jimmy, and Albert. Now, Albert Quinones was easily found at his home on Maple Avenue, so they're able to get him. They have like kind of this elaborate ruse where they end up taking him into custody. I won't go into it.
Oh, they told him he won a TV.
Well, he's sitting at home, and this plainclothes cop comes and peeks in the window, and his sister sees, and then she calls the police about a prowler. So then law enforcement comes and puts them in the car and is like, oh, well, y'all want to come down to the station and make a report? And so Albert agrees to do this, and then they have him and take him into custody.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
Because they wanted to do this so that he didn't let Jimmy and Ricky know they
Right.
were on to them. So, yeah, that was kind of the elaborate ruse. So after a 2-hour interview, Albert refuses to talk and is released. Detectives went to work obtaining arrest warrants for Ricky Kasso and Jimmy Triano. Around 7 a.m., a homeowner on Bluff Point Road calls police talking about an old Pontiac car that's parked in front of her house and that there are these two kind of strange teenage boys sleeping inside the car.
Oh, yeah, and anyone's going to notice that.
Well, about a dozen officers swarm the area and arrest the two teenagers. Because it's Ricky and Jimmy asleep in this car. Nothing could have prepared law enforcement for what they were about to hear. Jimmy immediately spilled the beans. He told police the motive was that Gary had stolen drugs from Ricky. On June 19th, he had been with his friend Ricky when the group, meaning Albert, Ricky, Gary, had gone to Dunkin' Donuts, then to the woods. On the way up, Albert told Jimmy that Ricky planned to kill Gary. Now, this surprised investigators because they had assumed that this murder was some sort of like spontaneous rage killing, but now they have Jimmy saying it was a premeditated murder.
Uh-oh.
As they built a fire, Ricky kept telling Gary to take off articles of clothing to throw into the fire. Like, oh man, we got to get it bigger. Take off your socks. Throw your socks in the fire.
Yeah, you should put your underwear in the fire, man.
Yeah, for real. And eventually talked him into like cutting the sleeves out of his shirt to throw into the fire.
I think this shows how pliable Gary is even still. He'll do anything to please.
So after throwing his socks and his sleeves into the fire, Gary finally asks Ricky, "Are you trying to start a fight with me?" Gary agrees to fight Ricky as long as it's just the two of them and no weapons are involved.
Oh, so it's like a duel.
So he's like, if you brought me up here to try to pick on me and kick my ass again, I will fight you, but these other guys have to stay out of it.
Yeah.
And whatever.
I'll have you know this ass gets kicked all over, buddy.
The two start fighting, and the next thing Jimmy knew, Ricky had pulled a 4-inch pocket knife out and started stabbing Gary in the back. Gary tried to get away from Ricky and run. However, Ricky was able to drag Gary back by the legs. He kept stabbing Gary while the boy cried, "I love you, Mom."
Damn. Vicious.
Yeah. Then Ricky said, Ricky told Gary that you must say, "I love you, Satan."
No, dude. I'm not going to say that.
Gary said it once before Ricky stabbed him again in the back.
You should stop stabbing me. That's all I want to say.
Now, the police knew about Ricky's interest in the occult because it was only a few months earlier that he had been arrested for trying to rob a 19th century grave, right? When he's arrested, Ricky had a list in his pocket of the dignitaries in hell.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Jimmy then goes on to say that he helped Ricky drag Gary into a clearing. At that point, Gary kind of moves. He's not dead. And Ricky just starts stabbing him in the face. Then all three boys, Ricky, Jimmy, Albert, start covering the body with leaves and tree branches. After the murder, it's around 3 a.m., and that's when the boys walk back to Albert's house, where Ricky washes the blood off his hands and face like he doesn't even take a shower.
Ew.
I know. He borrows a t-shirt from his buddy. Jimmy and Ricky then go downtown. Sometime later in the day, Ricky tosses the murder weapon into the harbor. Jimmy's able to describe this knife. He says it's a 4-inch blade that had flasher written in gold lettering, and it had a black plastic handle.
Okay.
It was purchased at the head shop.
Nice.
Now, he confessed that a week later, Ricky asked him to return to the woods to help bury the body. And he did this. They took turns digging. Ricky then pushed the body into the hole, which again, there's not much of a hole.
Well, it shows they have no gumption. They can't even dig a proper grave.
He explains that the head wasn't cut off from the body. It was just so badly decomposed that it fell off when they moved Gary, and that's when Ricky kicked it. So that's how the skull ended up down near Gary's feet.
I mean, look what you're doing. You're helping your friend bury remains that are in a very advanced state of decomposition. I mean, at what point do you say this is crazy?
Or you're just not dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like this is kind of dumb behavior.
Well, it really
It's
is.
like something dumb people do. Now, when Albert was brought back in for questioning, he basically told the same story as Jimmy, yet he once again surprised detectives by saying it was Jimmy who had suggested that Ricky kill Gary, and that Jimmy had sliced Gary's throat during the attack. Albert did not make any mentions of advanced knowledge of the murder, but did admit that Ricky had been allowed to clean up at his house afterwards. Police had nothing solid to charge Albert with at this time, or so they felt, and they let him go. Finally, Ricky was brought in to give a statement, and it mirrored the other boys' story, except Ricky said they all three knew they were going to murder Gary, and that Jimmy helped do it.
Oh, that's a little bit different.
A second interview was conducted with Jimmy, and at this point, he admits that he helped Ricky drag Gary's body back during the attack. Like, as Gary's running, he does help grab him and bring him back. That he had probably broken the victim's ribs by, like, kicking and punching him.
Damn.
While he was on the ground. And that when Ricky dropped the knife at some point during the attack, Jimmy picked it up and handed it back to him.
This is a lot of assisting here, bud.
Jimmy was arrested and placed in a cell in the Suffolk County Jail. Now, all in all, it seemed to be an open and shut case for the courts. The remains were located, they had witness statements, and they'd secured confessions, apprehended the two suspects. There was an ever-growing pile of evidence. So, right, should be done.
Well, it sounds like an open and shut case to me.
Well, by Friday, July 6th, news of the murder had spread. It was even being reported in the New York Post and the New York Daily News. The press release mentioned that Ricky was part of a satanic cult, despite no evidence supporting the statement. So, of course, this sensational news was huge because the satanic panic was in full effect across the country. And so this was just something to really highlight, like, see, we told you this is happening.
Oh, this was a yellow journalism in the definitely in the 80s. Everything was sensationalized. All you need was a kind of weird looking kid known to like rock, heavy metal music, or God forbid the occult, and which Ricky is all these things. Troubled past, history with the law. And boom, it's a full-blown nationwide story.
Well, it was a bit of a PR nightmare because Suffolk County was supposed to write the press release, and they actually had like a media person in charge of writing the press release. And I guess that guy had been out of the office or something, and the Northport police chief didn't want to write it at all. Like, he didn't want to have any part of it. He was like, I'm not equipped to write this press release. Y'all do it. So some guy in the Suffolk County Police took it upon himself to write this press release that was kind of ridiculous. It's
really
written like a school report, not like a press release. And it goes on to say all this stuff that's not true about the satanic cult and devil worship. And there was no evidence to support this. So Suffolk County's like, dude, we have a big PR nightmare on our hands.
Oh, wow.
Because now everybody's thinking this is something it's not. You got all these reporters calling. It's become, it's chaos. It's madness. There's, reporters and news people everywhere. It's shining our, community it's putting our community in a bad light. But to further this PR nightmare, one of the lieutenants told reporters, quote, "You've got a whole group of satanic worshipers. This is a sacrificial killing. They built a roaring fire in the field near the woods. They cut the sleeves out of his shirt and burned them, and they took his socks off and burned them. I don't know what it's supposed to mean, but this is what they did."
Oh my God. Somebody tell that guy to sit down.
Satan loves socks. It's pure Satanism. Burning socks is pure Satanism, Dylan.
Well, I mean, it's abnormal.
They were chanting while they were doing this. Just before they killed him, they forced him to say, "I love Satan."
Wow. Somebody tell that guy to stop
Yeah.
giving quotes and to just go somewhere and be still.
So in the days that followed, information started coming out that Ricky had taken two friends, a guy named Rich Barton and Mark Floramonte, to see Gary's body. Someone had even called Yvonne Lowers after Gary's murder and whispered, "You will never see your son again because I just killed him," and then hung the phone up.
Damn.
And she was bothered by this, but like, she didn't know if it was a prank call. I mean, she didn't really know what to do.
It sounds like a mess.
Yvonne bumped into Ricky downtown after the murder and told him, she hadn't seen her son Gary in several days. She was like, "Hey, do you know anything about Gary? I haven't seen him." And Ricky tells her no, and then just like walks off laughing hysterically, which was upsetting because she's like, "Why would he do that?
Why would he be laughing when I just
Yeah.
asked about
My son?"
my son? Yeah.
I thought they were friends. Like, she doesn't really know what's happening. Parents and residents were appalled to learn that despite the rumors and teens actually viewing Gary's body, that no effort was made to report that their friend had been killed. It was very disturbing. Within a few days, between 15 to 30 teenagers learned of Gary's murder. The body was located only about a 10-minute walk from the quaint drag of the Harbor Park, and no one breathed a word of it to police or adults. And it wasn't like no one cared about Gary. I mean, he did have several friends who wondered if he had run away or was in hiding. One guy called jails and hospitals looking for Gary. Anthony Zinkas, who knew the boys involved, said, quote, "If you're a street kid doing drugs, why would you go to a cop? If you don't have a good relationship with your parents, why would you tell them that your friend murdered somebody?"
I guess that's kind of a valid point, but we've seen this before. We've seen this in groups of kids before in cases.
Another friend named Denise Walker said, quote, "It wasn't shocking. It was disappointing. I always felt they had something to prove because everyone looked up to them." Ricky was always pushing the envelope. He was like wrecking fences, ripping down signs, beating people up, stealing cars, smashing them up. They just got carried away. I mean, that seemed to be the attitude of their peers. It was like, "Oh, well, this is just one more thing they did."
Yeah, because they've been doing crazy shit this whole time. But this is a big deal, folks.
Yeah. Another boy said, quote, "It's just the suburbs. There's nothing better to do than take drugs."
And kill people?
I guess.
Gosh, guys, you have a poor outlook on things.
I know. I'm like, this attitude that sort of permeates this group of young people in this town is, it's something else, right? At the arraignment, a photographer happened to snap a picture of Ricky Kasso wearing an AC/DC t-shirt. He had his long, greasy hair, kind of looking wild-eyed. And, of course, this is labeled, by the media as the Satan Kid, a Lucifer-loving menace, all thanks to devil music. Look, he's wearing an AC/DC t-shirt.
Yeah, they are the devil.
The Kassos didn't show up for their son's arraignment. Now, he looks disappointed when he realizes that no one is there to support him. Jimmy Troiano's adoptive parents were in the courtroom to support Jimmy, but it was as if somehow during this hearing, Ricky realizes that his life is effectively over. Like, he kind of goes in being all cocky, like, "Oh yeah," but by the end is totally deflated.
So it's a kind of a realization's dawned upon him.
Yeah, no longer this wild boogeyman of Northport. The teenager is reduced to like a scared little boy. The news of Satan in Northport changed people's lives. Kids were taken out of school. Families moved out overnight. Teenagers felt they had to distance themselves from rock music that they liked. And that dirtbag image, which had once been considered kind of cool, like they had to stop dressing that way. They didn't want to be associated with this. They didn't want people to think they were Satan worshipers or murderers, right? So in his cell, Jimmy is quite withdrawn, and eventually he's ordered to be moved to a sick bay, and they place him under suicide watch. Now, Ricky appears much more calm. He's asking to see copies of the newspaper. He seems excited to see his name in print. The jail psychologist was actually shocked to see how normal seeming that Ricky was. Like, he half expected this, like kid chanting and, speaking in the tongues or something. And he's just normal and calm and...
Hey, did we make the front page again?
Yeah. Ricky tells the doctor, quote, "I was high on PCP. It sounds like the newspapers are making a bigger deal out of this than what it really is."
They're not, Ricky.
You murdered someone.
Cold-bloodedly.
Ricky was moved to administrative segregation, which is typically reserved for the very dangerous criminals. He would be checked on every 30 minutes by guards, twice as often as the general population inmates. And though the psychologist didn't think he was really like a danger to himself, he thought because he's young and troubled, like he needs to be checked on, right? His belt and shoelaces were taken as a precaution. Ricky spoke to his mother on the telephone but refused to eat dinner. He was angered watching a news report in which they pronounced his name Kasso instead of Kasso. So he's kind of bitching about that.
He's worried about the wrong things.
Then he finally goes to his cell. Just after 12:30 a.m., Ricky is waiting for the guard to make his round, but the guard is late. Suddenly, the entire cell block starts chanting, "Hang up, hang up." It was then that Ricky stood up using the sheet from his mattress and tied it around his neck. And just as the officer was making his way into the cell block, Ricky jumps. He secured the sheet to the cell door.
Yeah.
And everybody hears a loud thud. They estimate Ricky was dead within 30 to 40 seconds.
Oh, my gosh.
So the officer finds Ricky maybe about 5 minutes later and cuts him down, but it's too late. Despite exhaustive efforts to save his life, Ricky was declared dead at 2:17 a.m., taking any chance of justice for Gary with him.
Wow. I don't know. I mean, I would be torn. I would be glad he's no longer with us, honestly, if I was one of Gary's family or friends. Because, I don't know. Sometimes I know some people see as the people sitting, reflecting about what they did for, years, even in prison as a better justice. But I don't know. I kind of don't want him to get to live any more life because Gary didn't get to. So this came full circle, didn't it?
It did.
Very quickly.
So the Kassos were informed of Ricky's suicide and told they would need to identify his body. Only a few short hours before his death, Ricky had spoken to his mom on the phone, and that was the first time he confessed that he had killed Gary. It wasn't hard for his mother to believe, as she had watched his descent into darkness over the past few years. He told her, quote, "Mom, I was absolutely out of my mind on mescaline. I was out of control. I didn't know what I was doing." So when his parents find out what's happened, and of course they share it with his siblings, 11-year-old Wendy, when learning of the news, she could barely wrap her head around what her brother had done. Before she had a chance to make sense of these charges against Ricky, now he was gone, Wendy had the realization that her brother and the boy he killed were never coming back. And this was like a really pivotal moment for, an 11-year-old to have to deal with this.
Damn, what a thing to have to think about.
Dick and Lynn Kasso opted to have their son cremated, and they did not wish to hold a funeral for him. Dick told the, the funeral folks that he would pick up the ashes sometime later. Lynn Kasso was upset, but confided in a friend, quote, "Don't think I'm hard or cruel, but it's over and it's better this way. He's at peace."
Damn.
Dick and Lynn then drove to Argyle to spend the rest of their summer at the cabin, and it was probably a good thing they did because the press had already arrived in town. They were splashing more news of this horrific case across the front page. People were camping out on the Kasso's lawn, ready to harass them.
And his turning straight to suicide and being successful, I think would only fuel it.
It definitely did.
It certainly wouldn't make it end any quicker.
The world wanted to see Ricky Kasso in the courtroom. Jimmy would get less attention in the case. Someone needed to be held accountable, and Jimmy Triano was their best bet. Hinging a high-profile murder case on the sworn statements of 2 drugged-out street kids was risky, but it was all the prosecution had. Due to Albert Quinonez's drug state at the time of the killing, his testimony was brought into question, and at Triano's trial in April of 1985, he was acquitted of second-degree murder charges.
Really?
But has continued to have legal troubles over the years.
Man, this story is crazy.
It is a crazy story, Dylan.
I mean, I think it's a cautionary tale.
You do?
Yeah, I think in many ways, you know.
No, it's definitely a wild story, and just such a... I mean, just there's so many things about it that are troubling. I mean, you've got these kids who just seem completely apathetic, like a whole generation of young people that just seem so apathetic, and then they're all using drugs, dropping out of high school. I was looking at some statistics, Dylan, while I was researching this case, and it turns out that like in 1980, there was like a 14% dropout rate.
Yeah, you were like, how are all these kids dropouts?
And in like 1990, so like 10 years later, that was cut like more than, I think it was like cut by like, you know, more than half.
You said it was 6%.
Yeah,
at
I think
that
it was
point,
like 6% or something.
which is a huge cut. So you were wondering why were so many kids on board with dropping out of school, you know?
Yeah.
It's very strange. Well, gosh, Heather, you took us for a ride. I mean, that felt like a full-on descent into madness.
Well, yeah, and I think the other part of that is, you know, you have this case, but this is not an isolated incident. As you mentioned, there were other murder cases in the 80s. I'm thinking of the one specifically that the River's Edge is based on.
Yes.
I want to say that guy, the perpetrator, is Broussard. I think his name is Jacques Broussard. And he murdered this girl in Milpitas, California. It was like a girlfriend. And took a group of kids to see the body. And everyone knew about it. And nobody said a thing.
She was kind of laying out in the open?
Yeah. And people were just going and like checking it out like it was cool.
I would be totally devastated if I was even told about it, let alone someone's like, hey, come with us. And this is what we're doing. I would report it instantly.
No, it's very disturbing.
Even as a 6-year-old kid, I would report a body to someone.
What do you think?
Well, thank you for that story.
So my main source today was The Acid King, written by Jesse P. Pollock. He also directed the documentary The Acid King. And there is a Rolling Stone article that appeared right after, you know, this case kind of came into the spotlight. And it is, I'm looking up I'm sorry, I had it written down and forgot it. But it's a Rolling Stone article. I can't think of the guy's name right offhand that wrote it. But David Breskin. And he really breaks it down. It's called The Kids in the Dark. And he just breaks the story down by interviewing a lot of kids in this community and trying to get to the source of why did this happen? And why was there so much trouble in this, you know, middle class, suburban,
fairly small community
neighborhood? Why did this happen? And I think he kind of gets more out of, you know, the story, more to the story than these other articles that are just like, oh, Satan in the suburbs, the devil made him do it.
Well, that's because his sounds like his has a lot more heart to it. It's not just
this kid listened to Judas Priest. He must be evil.
It's not just there for the if it bleeds, it leads headlines. And he's really trying to figure out why this happened.
It's Black Sabbath's fault.
Oh, my gosh. Who are we going to blame now?
Ozzy.
God, can we even blame Ozzy now? I don't think we can blame Ozzy still.
Witches gather at Black Mass.
Da-da. I mean, we can't blame.
I like girls with chunky asses.
Okay.
Evil minds that plot destruction.
I think Heather's broken today. Yeah, she's been working
I'm
too
hungry.
hard.
I'm ready to eat something. So I have to wrap it up.
I'm going to wrap it up by saying thank you to the host
Before
of...
my hunger turns to hanger.
Oh, God, please no. I would like to thank the people, our new patrons who sponsored
Anna and Margaret.
Anna and Margaret, thank you for sponsoring today's episode. And thank you to all the new patrons. We have quite a few. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the old patrons. And thank you to every one of our listeners.
Thanks, Dylan.
And thank you to Heather.
Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. You know, Dylan, without you and your can-do attitude and your little ray of sunshine that sets fires and causes cancer, I would not be able to make the show happen. So thank you. Thank you for being you.
It would definitely be different.
Thank you for being a friend.
Well, on that note, I'm going to leave on the high note.
Bye, Dylan.
Bye.